And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the weekly AWE Digital Wellness Podcast. We have the honor today of speaking with Dr. Peter Forkner. He is a psychologist in Boston, has worked extensively in the university system and counseling system services, working with students, uh, adolescents, adult populations. He has a lot of interesting insight on the role of AI in mental health. I originally stumbled upon one of Peter's posts on LinkedIn around a year ago, speaking about how AI can shape the modern approach to therapy. And I just had to have a chance to speak with you, Peter. Peter, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, so this is going to be a really exciting conversation. We're talking about AI and human connection, a very prescient topic. We've spoken before on previous podcasts about how lots of people nowadays are using AI as a means to supplant normal human talk therapy. So why don't we just dive right in with that? Do you have any thoughts on this increasing trend of using AI as a therapist?
Yeah. I think it's fascinating, actually. So as you mentioned, my career has mostly been in college mental health. And when I first started getting into AI back in 2022 and realized that these LLMs are basically conversation tools, and I was working in a profession which is, foundationally about conversation. I knew that this was going to be something that was going to impact the work that I did and that people in my role did. So I started really researching sort of the effectiveness of these tools. Hey, how's it going?
There he is.
Oh, there he
Oh,
goes.
Black box again.
Excellent. So I started researching the effectiveness of these tools and learning about them and the capabilities of generative AI to have these conversations, and actually had uh, the pleasure of being able to run a small pilot at the university that I was working at, with staff and students and faculty, with one of these tools, just to see, hey, is this actually something that's going to be helpful, or is this more of a gimmick? And what the results of the pilot showed me is that actually there is some value to these tools. Um, but and sorry, that's a kind of a long-winded way to get to your question,
Yeah.
but I think generally what I've found is that these tools are excellent at validation, excellent at empathy, and that kind of support. And in fact, in many ways, it might actually be better than what we're capable of as humans, or at least able to do it more accurately and consistently. However, they're not therapists. And I think um, the companies that are creating AI tools for mental health support have done themselves a disservice by making the sort of comparison for what these tools can do to therapy, which is so much more essentially human. Now, I would call these tools the most impressive, personalized, engaging psychoeducational tools ever invented. And they provide, and if you look at the research, they're actually quite good at what they do, but it's not therapy. So um, maybe to put a point on what you're saying is that I think a lot of people are using these tools. They're finding them very helpful. They're getting a lot out of them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're providing the same level or type of support that one would get from a human therapist.
So I appreciate you telling me that, and just wanted to welcome Christian Dominique. He's our co-founder at AW Digital Wellness, joining in from Montreal today. Christian, how are you doing? Maybe he's a little bit frozen. So before Christian joins in again, I wanted to dive in on a part of your question, which was uh, well, the response to the question, which was that AI isn't therapy. It can provide good emotional support, but it isn't therapy. First, perhaps define what therapy means to you, and why does AI not constitute that definition?
hmm Um, well, therapy at its essence, when you look at the research on therapy and what is good therapy, uh, it's clear that the relationship one has with the therapist is absolutely essential, regardless of what type of therapy you might be practicing, whether it's CBT or psychodynamic or what have you.
Mhm.
Um, and that is because there is a transfer of trust and vulnerability that can occur between two humans, and that is in my opinion and in much of the research essential for change to occur. Now, it's true that the research and the surveys that have been done on the use of AI for mental health support shows that people are using these tools for very serious conversations. In fact, I was just looking over a study recently which showed that I think a third of teens who use AI for mental health support um, prefer them to humans for serious conversations.
Hmm.
And I think that's important to examine, though, because initially, it'll cause you to go,
Yeah.
what's that about? um, and I think it's important to sort of boil this down, because what you have here is the ability to consult with an expert. Like if we're talking about using AI has, we'll say an infinite data set in terms of knowledge. And so you're able to consult this data set in terms of for advice or for, what would you do in my situation? Or how should I be responding? And it's going to tell you based upon that data set what you should do. But that's very different than what it means to share something scary or something embarrassing or something um, very personal to
Hmm.
yourself, that requires vulnerability and an assumption of trust. And so when you share that with an LLM, you know
Hmm.
that you can close that window
Hmm.
and it's all gone. You share that
Hmm.
with a therapist, even though they're sworn to confidentiality, they
Yeah.
are going to they hold that knowledge, and they hold the power
Yeah.
to use that knowledge in a potentially helpful way, but also a harmful way. And so there's that exchange of trust. So it's a very different experience using an LLM in these different circumstances. So um, again, a bit long-winded way of answering your question, but I guess
Yeah.
what I'm saying is that
Yeah.
to engage with a human requires more emotional energy and vulnerability.
It seems like the key component there is unloading that information onto another human being. And the difference here being that if you type that into some sort of chatbot, right, that is a very uh, different process than relaying that information to a trusted individual. Right? You
hmm
also mentioned before that most of the outcomes in a therapeutic relationship are determined by the therapeutic relationship itself, right?
hmm
So effectively, more so than it sounds like the biggest difference here, more so than what the therapist or the AI actually says, it's the act of the client, patient, uh, disclosing that information to a trusted source. And would you say then that the AI companies could hear this and say like, okay, then we need to develop some simulacrum of a human that looks like a human, that can be spoken to and responds like a human, so
hmm
that the client or the patient has the feeling that they're disclosing the information? Would that close the gap then, essentially, in what you're saying?
I think it's an interesting idea, when you start looking into the future And as these AI therapists or mental health support tools start to integrate the ability to recognize facial expressions, emotion in tone of voice, as these systems become more sophisticated and they become more realistic, is it uh, are they able to create something that is so close to an experience of actually having a conversation with another human being? Would that make it more therapeutic? It's hard for me to believe, but you know what? I never, 5 years ago, I wouldn't have said I was having this conversation with you. So, um,
Well, if we can look at the deeper issues, I think why there's this need is because people feel disconnected, right? So even people that are in the same room, even families, even couples are in the same room, but they feel disconnected. They're more connected with their phones, their device, and also with their other worries. Life has so many things and stressors, right? So you're there, but you're thinking about something else. You need to do this,
mhm.
your deadline for school, your deadline for work, and you're not communicating with someone there. So this disconnection is, I think, at the root of why people are seeking non-human things, because they're not getting it in the real life with real humans, right? And how can we use AI as a tool that also help people reconnect with others and themselves and the world in general? I think that's kind of the challenge, is to say, can we admit that AI is there? It has some pros and cons, as you mentioned. We've been very clear that we're building AI, but we don't call it a therapist. It's support, it's a coach, it can be an assistant, it can be psychoeducation, but you need real humans in the equation, right?
Absolutely, and it's an interesting idea, right? That the more we become distracted, the more we're seeking that undivided attention. It makes me think of, a child, right? When a child is growing up, and the importance of the role of a caregiver to give that person undivided attention, and that conveys to that individual that they are worthy of attention. They're worthy of
Yeah.
of other people's relationships and time. And as we sort of become more distracted with our devices and our phones, and certainly my kids would say that I can be guilty of that at sometimes, that are people more likely to go to an LLM, which will give you the sort of kudos that you're looking for? I mean, it was funny when I was thinking about talking today. I said this to my wife. Um, I found myself last week. I'm a super user of AI. I often use it in my personal life and my professional life, and something. I got an email that I was really excited about, and even though I was aware that this was very bizarre, I found myself cutting and pasting the email into the LLM because knew that the LLM would be like, "That's great, Peter. I'm so happy for you. That's so wonderful." And I mean, I did it in this sort of way where I was looking at myself doing these things and feeling a little bit weird. And at the same time, is this something that we're going to see integrated more and more, especially as AI becomes more powerful and more uh, human-like, or
Well, soon or probably today, your AI can probably already automatically read your email and
that's true.
and then
Yeah,
tell you that, right? So
it'd be-
it's going to become more and more invasive, intrusive, and then we
absolutely.
start to rely on it emotionally. And
Yeah.
thanks for sharing this very real story. I think one of the things we've realized is that people build habits around technology, around AI. It's just going to get more and more, and we really created this concept of reset or digital reset for people to kind of just take a step back, like you did, right? You were kind of you were doing it, but aware at least. I was like, wait a minute, am I really doing this for this validation? Yeah, right. But we want to raise the awareness to say that we can, as human beings, start to have those checks and balances in our life, with our friendships, with our coworkers, with ourselves, to say, wait, no, that's not real human connection, and I don't need this validation. This is a tool, right?
Yeah.
So if it
Yeah.
can help me respond to the email better, okay. But if it's helping me have an emotional need that I'm not having with my friend, my children, my wife, whoever, then that's starting to become not useful or not real. It's not sustainable, right?
Well, yeah, you're actually bringing up a really interesting point, and this is something that I've thought quite a bit about, which is, are these tools replacing relationships, or are they supplementing them?
Hmm.
And it's interesting when you start digging into some of the more recent surveys. What you're finding is that many people are using them. They're getting that sort of emotional validation, but I think from the um, most recent surveys I saw over the summer, they said something like 40% of teens who use LLMs or some sort of um, uh,
Then AI.
like LLM, use them to learn skills to be applied in their real relationships,
Mm.
which is, I think, is really encouraging. So yes, they are using it for serious conversations. They are using it for mental health support, but 80% of the teens who were surveyed were saying that they spend far more time with their human relationships than they do with AI. So I think that the picture that I'm starting to see is that AI, yes, it provides this sort of supplementary support, but that generally at this point, people are still using it to improve their ability to navigate the complexities of real relationships.
And would we think, or is there data on, are the current LLMs or Gen AI good at helping people in generational, relational aspects? Because it has, like you said, not infinite, but let's say much more than you can have in your brain
Yep.
information. But
Yep.
then it picks and choose, right? So how, and that's what we're trying to do in our models of our generation of Lumi, right? The AI is like, okay, well, are we validating the response, because sometimes it's just picking and choosing because there's more response like this, right? But if you were to like ask an AI to see what's going on for therapy, they can schedule the social media, and what
Hmm.
you hear in social media are things like everyone's a narcissistic, we have like toxic relationship and you should get out, right? And like, what's the way to make sure that the Gen AI is giving that good relationship advice, right? And is it good enough? We could say that with therapists as well, right? So
Yep.
there are therapists and coaches that are better than others, right? So it's
Yep.
not because someone give advice that it's relatable. And is it personalized to that person? Well, we can say, yeah, maybe if you have a paid version, or it knows your chat, you can be a little bit more personalized and get better and better response. But I'm still challenging the fact that even if you're saying 40% of people are using it, are they really getting the right advice for the short term, the medium term, and the long
Hmm.
term? Because
Well,
like our generation is now like a throwaway generation, right? So we have the most divorce rate, or equalized at 50%. People are lonelier than ever. We have the least sex per year on average in decades. So we're not having sex. We're not being connected. How is that being portrayed in AI to give real relationship advice? I'm really wondering, like, who's validating those things?
Well, that actually is going to be important, right? To ensure that the tools that are accessible and that are being used by people are pulling from the right data sets.
Hmm.
Um, I think based upon survey results, people are generally happy with the advice that they're getting, the support that they're getting through their LLM. But I also think that this sort of brings in a sort of separate topic, which certainly I saw a lot in college mental health,
Hmm.
which is over the past couple of decades, we have seen the expansion of this term mental health. 20 years ago, when somebody came in, they had anxiety, it was, a diagnosable DSM, diagnosable anxiety disorder. And now, uh, people today use the terms anxiety and depression to describe, mood states.
Yeah.
And that's just become a part of the lexicon. And we've also had this expansion of what mental health covers. Again, 20 years ago, if it wasn't in the DSM, then maybe it wasn't mental health. And now loneliness is mental health. Disconnection is mental health. Developmental struggle is mental health. And so we've had this broadening of the term of mental health. So I think there's room for these LLMs to give pointed mental health advice
Mhm.
because our category has become so broad. But I think there's also, could these LLMs help somebody with a significant addiction? Could these LLMs help
Right.
somebody with a significant eating disorder or severe depression or suicidality? Should they be used? And I think the answer is absolutely no. And so
Yeah,
I think what's hard about having this conversation is that we're using the term mental health, but I think we need more accurate terms to describe what the suffering of the individual and what would be best. Because I can see for many people, I'd say, if I could do an evaluation of them and I knew that their issue was developmental or, episodic, I could say, you know what, it'd be great before the next time we meet, that you consult with the LLM, before you're going to, that party of social anxiety, some social anxiety, and I'm not in the clinical sense, but you're feeling anxious about going into a group setting. This would be a great tool for you to consult with in terms of how to start conversations and how to feel more comfortable and things like that. But if we're treating an actual disorder, I'm not going to send somebody to an LLM for that.
yeah, very good distinction. And we're talking about like popularized terms, narcissistic, toxic.
Yeah.
There's a song called "My Anxiety" or something. If I
Yeah,
remember.
I hate that song.
I'll have to look it up.
Yeah. The idea is the broadening of the term. But if you really think about mental health, right, and it's not mental illness, right? Mental health to me is mental well-being, right?
Mhm.
So there's a spectrum of clinically, depressed or suicidality or has committed suicide attempt, to I just don't feel good today, which is a mood state, as you mentioned. But they can lead, they can compound, right? So I think if you take holistically and say like mental well-being, then we should help even people that are relatively happy to be even happier, right? That's what I'm writing books about happiness. I became a happiness expert to say, even if you're not clinically depressed, you don't need antidepressant or therapy for 2 years, you can be happier than you are today.
Mhm.
Pretty much 95% of people could be happier than they were yesterday or today, right? And how can we use these tools to say, let's first make you happier, and that also going to be a preventive factor, right? You're going to build resilience, you're going to build tools to be able to deal with those situations, emotional regulation, of course, resilience, and maybe AI can be a coach in that way to say these are the tools, try them out, but there's still humans that are there to help if you're getting off, if you're trending in the wrong way. But if you're okay, average, you want to be a bit happier, it's like same thing we call like mental health to me is mental gym, right? So you might be fit, you're not obese, you don't need to go to the gym every day, but you want to maintain your health. You want to eat healthy, right? So nutrition and exercise is good. Well, we need to think of mental wellness and well-being in the same way to say we need to work on it every day, every week. It doesn't just
Mhm.
come like that, right?
Absolutely. I totally agree. And that's and so, bringing it back again to college mental health, over my career, we saw, 40, 50, 60% increase in the number of students requesting services. And that
Hmm.
actually prompted this alarm, you know, saying there's this crisis of mental health. There's an epidemic of mental illness going on. And while yes, there were increases in diagnosable conditions, and you did see some people reporting, increased risk for suicide. Um, the vast majority of the new people who were coming in and requesting services were people who would not be traditionally defined as somebody who would need services in the past. And so I think, to your point, that doesn't mean that they don't benefit from seeing a therapist, but I do believe that they could benefit from something other than a therapist. And actually, it's something I made an argument for was that I think there can be some harm for somebody going to a therapist when they don't need it. Like I brought up loneliness before, and I think you mentioned it as well. The idea that we should be sending people who are lonely to a therapist is bizarre. I mean, it's just if we're considering that mental health and the idea of fixing that is to put the person in a room with a stranger, um, I think we've lost the plot.
Yeah, very well. I did some study last week on loneliness actually, and how it affects mental health. So it's not a condition itself, right? But it affects well-being in many ways, physically and mentally, right? So I don't think loneliness is a disease or illness, but it might be a social disease of this time, right? Or something
Yeah.
that's preventing social and individual well-being, right? So, and one of the ways that we found that might increase the idea that we can be more connected is to create communities, right?
Mhm.
Is to have like, and we can use technology for that too.
Mhm.
AI might not be the best suited for that, right? But we can use technology to create real communities online and offline that says, hey, we are more connected than we think, right? And then in our reset, we're doing different types of reset. So reset is kind of a type of meditation, but not exactly. It uses science-based, evidence-based studies. So I'm researching a lot of articles on meditation adverse effects or not, and vagal nerve regulation. And there's one thing that I've been studying lately is the study of oneness or non-duality, right? So it's a philosophical concept that says we are all connected, or we're all one, or we're part of one. But that also has some potentially very interesting effects on loneliness, right? So it makes people feel that even though they might not always be as much communicating one-to-one with people, because we have more technology, right? We're on a video conferencing now. It would have been great to be with you three in whatever circumstances, but live, but we're not.
Yeah.
So we're feeling a little bit less connected in general, even though we might have good friends, or some people, some studies said, I think there was 28% that said that did not have one close friend. So they had friends, but not real friends, right? So yeah, I have this friend, but not. So I think the definition of close friend was someone that you could confide in,
Right.
right? And that's what we're talking about with those LLM. People are confiding to AI because they don't have those close connections, right? But when you try to teach, and that's one of the things that we do in a reset is incorporate those elements of awe and oneness, right? The world is more beautiful than you think. And people have reported that they have less fear, less jealousy, right? More happy state after they do these 25 minutes, right? And those are humans talking to humans, or listening to something that says, hey, we're using technology to do all this, but in the end, you feel more connected with nature and with people, right? So we had people said more connected with nature because we talk about the universe and the world and the forest, and also about the beauty of having other people that you care about, and even the compassion for people that you might dislike or might be more difficult to deal with, right? So we try to rebring these tools, because also if you look at social media and you look at politics, everything is more and more divisive, right? So it's this camp, this ages group. It's like, when you understand that young or old, man, female, whatever gender, whatever sexual orientation, whatever place in the world, we're all one, then people start to act like that, right? So they might smile to their neighbor that they don't smile to them walking their dog. They might, say hi to the cashier. They might just feel a bit more, because that translates to real relationship, not just online, but it can be curated or helped by technology, right?
So I want to jump in quickly because you said something before, Peter, that caught my attention. I mean, this whole conversation has been very engaging, but I want to play devil's advocate. It's part of what we do here. You said that when people are lonely, sometimes it's not the best solution to go see a therapist. You described it as being put in a room with a stranger. Okay, but what is the alternative then, right? If you're essentially interfacing with an AI chatbot, you're going to be alone in a room,
Oh yeah.
given like the idea that you're speaking to somebody, but you're essentially talking to pixels on a screen, right?
Yeah.
That's representing a human.
Yep.
Um, why would it be uh, not better to see a therapist in
Mhm.
that comparison?
So I guess I'll say two things about that. One, I think that people who are going to a therapist for loneliness would benefit from uh, could benefit from an AI tool that helps them connect to others. So,
Mm,
just like what we're seeing in these studies, that people are using it for conflict negotiation, for how to pursue romantic relationships, to, all these sorts of like fine-tuned tools to be able to engage with others um, and learn how to find shared experiences or whatever would create community. So I think there's a like a skill building aspect to AI that would benefit that a therapist could do, but
mhm,
also someone could use AI. What the other thing I would say about that is that I think we've done in the service okay, in the service of trying to destigmatize treatment seeking for people who are struggling. So in the previous, 20 years, we worked really hard because we thought there were many students or many people out there who were struggling with a mental health issue, but were so concerned about the stigma of actually seeking help that they didn't do so. So we worked really hard on college campuses and probably in the general world right now to say it's okay to go see a therapist, right?
Well, in some
And
places in Asia, it's not the case, and some
yes,
places
yes,
in
it's less
Africa,
so.
yeah, but
This
yeah,
is mostly in Western, sort of
yeah,
Western circles, but it's growing internationally.
yeah.
Um, and so I think in we did a really good job of that. And unfortunately, maybe we did too good a job because what it ended up happening is we saw this effect where if you're struggling, you should go see a therapist. And so while yes, we lowered the stigma, but I think we encourage people to go see treatment or maybe even conveyed to people that they were broken or somehow had a mental health problem by
Mm,
saying, you are lonely. Okay, that means there's something wrong with you. You need to go work on that in therapy. When really, I mean, if we're talking about an ideal situation for somebody who's lonely, it's about community, right?
yes.
It's about like what Christian was saying. It was this we what would be a better tool for that person is to for someone in the community to bring them in as opposed
Yeah.
to somebody in a treatment context
yeah.
helping
Yeah.
that person resolve what's wrong with them so that they're not lonely anymore.
So it seems to be more of a failure to launch problem going from 0 to 1 because a lot of people just need that push, to go take action.
Yeah.
What viable solutions have you seen out there on the market now in your experience that sort of resemble what we're talking about here? If therapy is not necessarily the answer for somebody who's experiencing loneliness.
Well, in a college context, that which is, again, my background,
Yeah.
what I really was pushing for is that I didn't want our staff to be involved in the loneliness conversation, or
Yeah.
what I wanted were other members of the student affairs or from other pieces of the university to be pulling them in to
Mhm.
this is I think um, I think to some extent, and again, I'll speak as to my experience in college campuses, that we
Yeah.
took too much responsibility for the emotional well-being of our students.
Right.
And and instead of saying, "Hey, this is all of our responsibility to make sure that people feel included, that they feel like
Yeah.
they belong," that we're saying that no, this is something that is because it involves people feeling happy, sad, upset, whatever, that's the purview of the mental health treatment people. But really it's not. It's really about the communities. And so I'm limited by confidentiality. If somebody came to me and said that they're lonely, I can't be like, hey, you know what? I've got 3 clients who are also lonely. I would love to get you guys together
The
because
loneliness
you
club.
guys share all these things together. No, I can't do that. It's a terrible context to do that. So we just need to get better
Yeah.
about making sure that there are other people who are taking on this responsibility as well.
Yeah, we do a lot of outreach work with universities, and we often ask ourselves, if therapy is not the solution, right? If traditional talk therapy, where you most of the time see a therapist once a week for 1 hour a week,
Yeah.
out of the 150 whatever hours a week that you are spending, how much can it help with a person who really does need that push, right? That motivational change in their life. They're going to hear some things that are very good. And again, this is somebody who's coming from a therapy background saying this, who's worked with clients myself, that there are limits to the way that modern therapy is administered. And perhaps there are some methods that are also a bit outdated, right? Especially for the modern era.
Yeah.
Which is why we're seeing the rise of these, not just larger LLMs, but smaller chatbots that are
Yep.
meant to incentivize human behavior. Have you seen, you've worked with a lot of products in this space. Have you seen any in your experience that have been quite efficacious at addressing this problem?
Well, it's funny, I mean, I see that as such a promising pursuit, because I do feel like the mental health treatment field is needed an update for a long time. We haven't
Yeah.
had a technological upgrade, probably the only profession that hasn't had one
Yeah.
since it's a major one anyway, since its birth. And so I see a lot of promise in those kinds of tools, and I've seen a few out there, and I've talked to a few companies that are producing tools that are meant to augment the work that's being done in session, and
Mhm.
maybe providing some between session support to
Yeah.
create some cohesiveness. I mean, there's nothing more frustrating, and
Yeah.
this happened all the time, of having a client come in and you say, what would you like to focus on today? And they say, I can't remember. What did we talk about last week? And it's like,
Yeah.
there's no continuity between sessions. And so the idea that we could, okay, and you were sort of referring to this, that we could make it more than just 1 hour a week or one
Right.
hour every other week, that we could somehow use AI technology to bridge those sessions together seems really promising. The problem is that I've seen is that largely uh, the mental health treatment field is not very AI savvy. And I don't blame them. They're very busy, and so there's not a lot of time to sort of understand LLMs and these products that you're referring to and how they might help out. And I think they're somewhat resistant because,
Yes.
understandably, there's a
Yeah.
threatening aspect of this.
Yeah.
And I was talking about this with my wife the other day, who's also a
100%.
psychologist, of just like this idea of like, well, there is something uncomfortable about, you're doing the therapy, the AI is doing the therapy. Is
Yeah.
there a splitting? Does the client eventually start preferring the AI therapy? I don't know. There's some complicating factors, but
I
hopefully we
think
can
if you're
resolve it.
worried that AI is going to replace you as a therapist, you have other problems.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough.
I think that if you don't embrace it as a therapist or as just a provider, mental health provider, you're just going to fall behind, because there's going to be providers who will use it to supplement their therapeutic approach with their clients, and they perhaps will be more effective in
Yep.
achieving specific outcomes. So, we've noticed this problem, and allow me to not so subtle plug, but we've worked with a number of universities and noticed similar problems, especially with students. And one of the ideas that we had originally was to develop our own LLM. And we came out with it last week. It's called Lumi, and it's used to address specifically internet addiction and college mental health and mental health that you see issues. I know we use mental health as a blanket term here, but we want to integrate this into the AWE smarter phone, which we're also providing to students, right, as an attempt to have something that will be with them throughout the entire week, right? Something that they can interface on the go and have with them all the time. It's especially prescient with younger children, right? 8 to 18, or who get their first smartphones at 10, and just with completely unmitigated access to the internet. We don't know what sort of long-term consequences there are there. And it's part of the reason why we've developed this smartphone and brought it to the market, right? Just to see, okay, could a therapist take the insights, data gathered from this device, and somehow apply it in their approach? Because again, last thing you want is somebody coming to the session and saying, "Okay, that was like a week ago. Peter? What did we talk about again?
Totally.
Could you remind me?" Like,
Totally.
and it's them just falling back into the same old bad habits, right? And then you're
Yep.
playing catch up from last time. So that's one of the just most frustrating things for a therapist, just to see that a client really isn't applying the things that were talked about in the previous session. So you had mentioned to me previously, before our call, and I hope it's okay if I bring it up, that there was some sort of AI chatbot that you had been working on, or that you'd been
Yeah,
developed.
it's
Mhm.
really actually it's really almost the opposite of what we're
Mhm.
talking about.
Oh,
Instead
really?
of
Okay.
an AI therapist, it's an AI client. Because
Oh,
what I'm
wow. Okay.
finding is that if anything, AI is going to keep us on our toes in terms of
For
how
sure.
good we are at what we do. And one thing that has always frustrated me about the our profession is that, and this is an interesting observation I made. It's probably the only profession that you can go from having never practiced it before to the end of your career, having never sat in and directly witnessed a therapy session. Most of it is just, if you're lucky, you see a grainy old videotape on what therapy looks like. Most of what you get is classroom instruction. And then we're also the only profession in which you can go all again from the beginning of your career to the end of your career, having never been directly observed doing what it is you purport to do. So, I mean, yes, now there are some sites, and Bentley was one of them, in which we would videotape therapy
Yeah.
sessions and give feedback to our practicum students, but that's not the norm. You can definitely go through your entire training as a therapist having never been seen by an actual therapist to make sure that you're doing therapy. And then also, even in the case where you're being videotaped, your
Hmm.
supervisor is only seeing one out of every 20 sessions you have. And that's
Right.
supposed to be the sufficient amount of feedback that you're getting as a therapist in terms of how to become really good. And to be fair, I think there is a quality problem in our profession. And so the idea for this tool, which we're looking to partner with universities that are teaching programs, um, that what we're trying to do is using AIs to allow students to not only practice their skills on AI avatars, and the AI
Mm.
avatars then the system actually gives them feedback, quality feedback on how they performed in that intake or that therapy session. So you get those reps in, and you're also your supervisor is able to see how you've been doing. And then this tool will evolve so that it's
Mm.
actually listening to therapy sessions. And again, your supervisor will have a much better sense of what you're doing well and what you need to work on. So I think the potential for AI in both these directions are really impressive.
Thank
So
you.
would the provider use the AI client to basically improve their own skills and
Yeah.
get direct live feedback from this AI chatbot?
Yep.
Okay.
So it's basically set up where you select your client and then
Mhm.
you engage with them in a therapeutic way. My,
Yeah.
so again, my wife, who's also a psychologist, she's been doing all of our testing of our product, and she's been a therapist for 20 years. And just testing our product has changed the way that she practices
Oh,
with real clients. So
interesting.
the feedback is amazing. It's excellent. And you know, uh, so anyways, I think there's a lot of promise there.
Now we just need AI therapists speaking to AI clients and see what happens.
that that is definitely that's a movie right there.
Well, no, that actually happens. That's how some of the science of training, they make
Yeah.
some transcript with
Right.
avatars on both sides. So yeah,
Hmm.
that's already happening. But yeah, we're already at that chasm. But
Mm.
Peter, I did. Thanks for sharing with the audience. I did take a look at your website actually today concerning that, and I've been involved for many years in e-learning. I won't say how many years when the e-learning just existed, let's say. But now we have so much cool technology, right? We can use VR
Yep.
for learning. We can use haptics, robotics to train medical doctors instead of cadavers or real patients. So it's good that you're creating something that might help, like you said, level up the profession, because there are some average or not so good therapists out there, many perhaps, and some
Yep.
amazing ones, right?
Yep.
And to help like clinical supervision and ongoing, right? So I really I like the idea, and hope that we can partner and help the world, not only from the therapeutic side, but teaching therapists, teaching coaches
Yeah.
to do a better world, so to do a
Well,
better job. So thanks, Peter, for that.
yeah, no, I think we both agree that the quality therapists are essential and will always have a place in the future.
Yeah.
And so how do
Yeah.
we get there? Are we making better therapists by being able to uh, train them better, make them better at what they do? And are we providing them with technology that's allowing them to do their job better? So
That's great, yeah, and all as we are in the healthcare, with the compliance and the ethical use of technology, ethical AI, right? So that's great news. I think we have a lot of potential to help the profession from for training to people who need it or people that don't need it. We talked about people that don't really need it, but we can still help them, right? So
yeah,
let's help everyone as much as possible. Is always my idea, right? The bigger reach without stigmatizing, but without also sometimes, like you mentioned, people need to be told where you should be accountable, right? So
absolutely.
it's like I always have the mental gym idea, right? So if you don't go to the gym, don't expect to be better. If you eat bad food, don't expect, right? And don't say, oh, it's because of the food, oh, it's because of this, oh, it's or I'm the problem, right? And I
Yep.
was actually writing an article that was talking about that, exactly what you're saying, like the psychotherapy has become too focused on the ego, right? So it's like it's you who has this problem or not, but there's an ecosystem, right? So what are your close relationship doing? What are your peers? What are your community doing? What tools are embedding in that? What are the habits that allow this feeling of bad mood, or mood that can change into habits, right? Digital addiction, gambling addiction, gaming addiction, all those types of behaviors that are basically expressions of emotions that are not met and
Yep.
not regulated properly, right? So we have to give back tools to give ownership to people to say, yes, you can say that you have a mental problem if you want, but also you can own whatever version. Because if you remember on the DSM-5 and all the ICD-11, it is the diagnosis only valid for the last 6 months. So you can be diagnosed this now, and in six
Yeah.
months you're okay, right?
Yeah.
People are thinking, oh, I have this. No, it's just at this period you're feeling this, you're showing those behaviors, but tomorrow or in a week or in 6 months you could be better, you could be different. Every day is a new day, right? And we're kind of pigeonhole people to say, well, I'm this, I have ADHD, I have this, I have a problem with this, I have anxiety. In this day today you do. Now let's go
Yes.
and do better, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think what's really interesting about sort of the work that you're doing with regards to sort of internet addiction is that it's sort of like, you know, it's sort of like an eating disorder, right? One of the problems with treating an eating disorder is that people have to eat. So it's not like drug abuse where you're like, okay, and not to say that drug abuse is easy to fix, but like if you stop using a drug, then you no longer have to, then you no longer have the disorder. Now you can never stop eating, so you're always going to do it. And now in today's world, you can't exist without the internet, right?
You
You
can,
can
but it's very
barely.
difficult. I know some Amish communities. I see them once
Okay.
in a
Well,
while.
if you want to join the Amish communities, then
Off the
you have
grid, yes.
probably have a chance. Go off the grid.
Yeah.
But I think it's very hard to exist in today's society and be able to function even without a smartphone. I would love to. I mean, I would love to, and would be so scared to throw away my smartphone. But I feel like I need it, and at the same time, I recognize that I use it too much. And so it's this weird thing. So I really appreciate
I was able
this.
to do 2 months without it, but it's
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
Good for
I
you.
happened to have lost it in Argentina, and it took a while to get back. But I was happy. I was productive and happy in meeting people. But yeah, not everyone can do it or should do it. I'm not saying that that's the best way to do it. Just happened, and
Yep.
I took advantage of it instead of complaining, which we can do of many situations. But the point that you make is very relevant, right? So, and that's, thank you for saying that. That's what we realize at AW is we're not going to tell you. You know, most people will say do a detox, don't have your phone, or use an app blocker, or delete your app. No, that's not realistic. We're saying learn to be
Yeah.
aware and create that tech balance that's good for you and your peers, and that you're not, oh, I lost my time on this, or I fell in love with an AI or whatever it is, right? And thanks for noticing that we're conscious that we need tech. So it's not about removing it; it's about having a relationship. And you mentioned eating disorder. Same thing with sex addiction, right? So
Yeah.
you can live without sex, but you know, some people are fighting like sexual rights. People have the like, we are people built with biology to survive and have sex, right? So if
Mhm.
someone has a sex addiction, can you tell them, well, never have sex again, be a monk? Probably not, right? So you
Probably
have
not.
to manage something, right? So technology is something like that, right? And we also know now that love can be an addiction, right? So people have stalking traits because they're infatuated with someone, and right. So you can be love addict, but will you stop loving? Probably not either, right? So those are all things like we have AI, we have tech, we have social media. We're here, live having a great discussion. Let's use those things instead of saying let's shun them away, but let's use them responsibly. As I'm saying this, we are live, and I forgot to say to anyone that's on our socials, if you have any question for Peter, Mark, or myself, we have some Q&A on every Friday live session. So please talk about AI, humans, connection, loneliness, all the topics, therapist quality, engagement, college students. What are your thoughts? Please feel free.
I wanted to, I think while we're waiting for questions to come up, we throw this term addiction around. Do you think we're being a little too lax in like calling a lot of different things addictions, whereas it could just be an amalgamation of a lot of different disorders going on, right? When we talk about internet addiction, I mean, I did research on internet gaming disorder, and I compared it, using fMRI studies to alcoholism, cocaine use, and it doesn't necessarily meet the thresholds to be considered
Hmm.
to be equivalent to a substance use disorder. What I found instead is that you have a lot of disparate areas of the brain that are implicated in resting state analysis that also light up in alcoholism and cocaine use, but perhaps not with the same intensity. What you see it more resemble is, a lot of impulse control issues, like in the prefrontal cortex and a lot of other areas that are perhaps overactivated, and putamen decision-making processes, ventral tegmental area, a lot of different areas responsible in limbic reward pathways. We throw on the addiction, to describe a compulsive behavior, which is really in response to some sort of need that's not being met, right? Some sort of deficiency, right? I think the big one that we mentioned is loneliness, right? It's the deprivation of love and connection. And I think, and I thought of this when you were talking earlier, is there's this ancient Egyptian symbol. I'm sure both of you have seen, called the Ouroboros. It's the snake that is consuming its own tail, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And when I think of using AI as a method to supplant real human connection, I think of a problem that just feeds into itself. Because the more you become dependent on the AI, the more isolated you become from human connection, which
Mm-hmm.
can accelerate the problem, right? So,
So there's a question here.
yeah.
How a therapist could implement LLMs as a complement to its session?
Yeah, that's interesting. I, so in the conversations that I've had, I think from my perspective, I don't think it's a good idea as a prescriptive tool, because right now nothing you put in an LLM is going to be confidential. It's you're not sure the way that general LLMs are set up, that you can't, it's it's not like you can monitor what's going on, and it's important for a lot of these systems to keep a human in the loop. That's a term that's often used in these AI systems. Um, but that being said, I know I've had many conversations with therapists who say that their clients come in and say, "Hey, I'm getting great benefit from talking to ChatGPT about the issues that we're talking about in here," and they'll bring in transcripts from their conversations. And so I think if I were right now I'm not practicing, but if I were practicing, I think I would invest in a tool that allows me to um, maybe monitor what's going on. Obviously, I would that way, obviously I would never use it with somebody who I had concerns about risk. Um, but what happens with the tools that I've seen on the market is you're able to either put in your session note, and so it actually holds your session notes, and this is essentially a chatbot that is being informed by the work that's being done in session. Or you could write, a summary of a session note or something like that. Or, this client responds very well to cognitive behavioral interventions. Be sure to use this particular technique, when they're struggling. So you can sort of almost like train or cue the therapist, the chatbot to behave in a certain way in between sessions. So yeah, if a client came to me and they were using ChatGPT, I would certainly be comfortable with that. But as a prescriptive tool, or if I was doing that more regularly, then I would invest in one of these other tools that are on the market that are built to keep me in the loop.
Well, we didn't pay you to come to this interview or to say this, but that's exactly what we're doing. We're actually building that interaction between that bot and that therapist, where the therapist can inform the bot and the bot the therapist in a way that's conducive, and the session notes are integrated. And then if we're having a phone for children, then the parents can have, depending on what we agree, and of course ethically, and the child and the parents know which data is shared and whatnot. The parents can have summaries also of some of the interaction, mainly what they're doing with the phone. So you don't want to break the confidentiality and say things to the parents that, but in terms of what their use, for instance, if they tried to go to a porn site, or if they try to cheat on a test, because we have positive reinforcement, right? So if we said to the child to read a book, but they tried to cheat, or we told them to go to the library and they were at the skate park, then we can tell the parents, right? So things like that, right? But yeah, thanks for that. And maybe we'll invite you to our scientific advisory board, because those are the questions that we're trying to
Yeah.
have real therapists, people that understand what good therapy is, and also a bit of technology, and say, how can we create tools that is actually helpful and that creates that seamless interaction where people feel that they have a little bit more data to help, and that when something is supposed to help an AI agent, not a therapist, a support tool, they might be more informed than someone just chatting to chat or
Exactly.
whoever. Mhm. So great. Mark, any thoughts on that?
A lot of thoughts, like always, but my thoughts are all going in all sort of directions. Some people call it ADHD. I call it creative thinking. But we had Candace Thompson on our podcast 2 weeks ago, and I think I mentioned before, she's a psychotherapist from the Bay Area, from Silicon Valley, and we've gone into the subject of parasocial relationships, right? So relationships that are meant to supplant the need for human affection, right? Or so to resemble some sort of real romantic relationship. And we had that like movie with Jude Law, I think from 10 years ago. With,
I still have not seen it.
I haven't
I
seen it
need to
either.
see it.
Her, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think beyond just approaching AI as a therapist, which is meant to meet some human needs, right? So there might be people out there who are using it romantically. We already have people who are subscribing to OnlyFans models for the girlfriend experience, right? And engaging this
Yeah.
parasocial relationship. What are your thoughts on like people trying to address like the lack of intimacy using some sort of AI or digital
Well,
interface?
just to add on this, companionship
Yeah.
is the top rank. So companionship and therapy is number one use of LLMs.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I want to understand that more because that's something that I initially was very concerned about, and I
Yes.
still continue to be. But, you know, are those the outliers? And I don't mean like all the outliers. Like, is this going to be something, I think about my son who is 12 years old, and what is interacting with AI going to be like for him when in a few years he has avatars of beautiful people that he's attracted to,
Yes.
that will talk to him in perfect tones and always say the
Yeah.
right things and never do anything terrible. Like, will that be better than the awkward, uncomfortable conversations with his peers, and that might not go well, and there might be rejection or all these kinds of things? Will there be this will we head in this direction as a society where people are favoring these easier and maybe even more pleasant
Yeah.
experiences of companionship? um I don't know, I'm scared of it, but I'm also wondering, are these going to be the outliers, or
I,
will human connection always
I
be
mean,
valued?
I think we're already there. I think we've already crossed the
Don't say
threshold.
that to me.
Well, I think it's our responsibility, and that's why we're having those discussions. It's like it's our responsibility as people in mental wellness, mental well-being, as people in tech, and as parents, as human beings, to help this new generation that will be confused, to tell them, hey, this is good for this. So AI can do this, but AI cannot do this, right? It's our responsibility to say social media can do this, but it's not reality and cannot do this, right? And it's really important to kind of understand that fundamental need for connection and how people will have similar need for connection. And we can even express this in a very simple way, right? How many people, I think it's 46 million dogs, and how many people have cats, right? So there's an industry of people that are loving pets, right? And I'm not judging or whatnot, but
Yeah,
people
yeah,
love animals. But it's also a simulacrum relationship, because some people cannot have, you hear about the cat lady with 9 cats or whatnot, or some people have a healthy balance of dogs, but some people say to their love, to their dogs, they're my babies, they're my children.
Fur babies.
Okay. So, and that's also kind of an easy way, because the dog is fed,
Yeah.
the cat is fed, so you control the behavior. The love is kind of, oh, the man's best friend, but also you're actually, if you don't feed them, they die. So of
yeah.
course they're gonna love you, right?
But you can't really compare having a pet to like an AI model on the computer. It's like a completely different
No,
experience.
well, no. The good thing about the dog, so like I'm just making the comparison that yes, there is ways that people will find non-human
Mhm.
ways of connecting that is really a human need that they're looking for. But
Yeah.
the big difference with the animal is that they produce oxytocin, right?
Hmm.
Yes.
And vasopressin, which are the social
Mhm.
hormones. So you can feel similar emotions as you would as a human being, because
Yeah.
you can pet the dog, because you can hear them bark, and that you find that cute, and you have that similar thing. And
Yeah.
that's when the AI cannot do that, right? The
Not
AI
now.
is not now, but maybe in the future. Yeah.
I think a
Future.
lot of what you're talking about, Peter, it boils down to like human nature, in my mind. Maybe this is a gross generalization, favors the path of least resistance. And I think if there's an easier solution to produce an outcome, whether it's short term or long term, it probably becomes indistinguishable to the more caveman part of our brain. We will favor the easy path, right, to feel good, i.e., look at pornography instead of going out to the bar and meeting a woman, because that will be the uncomfortable, awkward experience. And I think we're already seeing this unfortunate trend that there's like millions of very lonely people out there who are using the internet to address short-term needs, right? That get met, but the long-term ones go unmet. And it's produced an epidemic of loneliness, and it's had huge disastrous effects in the dating market. And the capitalists come out of the shadows. And they're like, oh, we just need to make better technology, right? We need to make technology that looks even more human, that sounds like a woman, right? The age of the sex robots is upon us. It's really here. I know Bill Burr jokes about this a lot, but I think we're getting closer to it than we think, right? We're using, these platforms online already to try to get to that. That's just
But there's one good thing that we still have to hope is that our brain is still loving with the dopamine is
yeah.
released with like
Mhm.
unexpected release of
Yes,
of
yes,
of, ex,
yes, yes.
of reward, right? So aleatory release. So the thing with your son, you're saying, well, maybe the avatar will be so cute and whatnot, but if they're so complacent that it's kind of a given, people get like, so it's called like the well, there's the hedonistic treadmill, as you might know, right? So
Yep.
we're getting something, we're finding, we have a beautiful girlfriend or friend or business or whatnot, but now we're bored, right?
Mhm.
Yep.
So the thing with human beings is that they're still a little bit unpredictable, right? And that's what also makes it fun, right? You don't know what the person's going to say. You're not sure if they're going to be in a good mood today. And
Mhm.
that's, well, we would hope that they're mostly in a better mood, right? We don't want to encourage people to be uh, not disagreeable one day and agreeable the other day. We want like happy people that love each other, but that's not the case all the time. And I think there's still a component that humans need to, and it's also for their growth to be resilient and to learn. Right? That's other things we talk about in the reset is to accept that you are not perfect, you are suffering, and you're trying to find solution. So everyone is doing the same, right? And we can comprehend them with more kindness and compassion and help them, right? And that you cannot do with AI. You cannot have compassion for an AI. It's a machine, right?
Yeah.
You can have compassion for other human beings, and that is, I think, hopefully your son and others will have this insight eventually to say, well, it might be more difficult, but actually we know that if we want to be in the flow in terms of peak mental performance and also peak happiness, and the flow is when you're doing something with what matches your skill but a little bit more difficult,
Right.
and it can be 5 to 30%. Some people that are growing fast and are more resilient will go up to 30% more difficult, and they're like, I can do it. And some, after 5%, they just give up and they're overwhelmed. Okay. But to
Right.
be in that flow state, you need a bit of challenge. And AI is not providing the challenge. AI is just giving you that complacency. And, well, maybe it can challenge you on your editing of whatever
Yeah.
you're,
And this is
check
what
my grammar, but not in a human way.
Yeah.
it's also what Candace was saying last week, is that the good therapist will challenge the client as well, perhaps on some beliefs that they have. And AI has a sycophantic tendency of saying, yeah, Peter, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Why don't you go start that business of
Yeah.
South Park did an episode like, oh yeah, let's make a salad with French fries business. That's a great idea. Go out and do that. Like, perfect. Here's your business plan. It's like, no, like you need an
Yeah.
AI that's like more disagreeable.
But that feels good, which is why I
Yeah.
wanted to put that email into like
Sure.
into my AI coach to like tell me what a good job I did. There are certain, which is
Great job. Great job, Peter.
yeah, I know. I always told my staff that like I'm too insecure to not have demonstratable. I always used to do a lot of data analysis on how
Yeah.
well the center was going, because I always told them I'm too insecure to just rely on the fact that I did a good job. I need proof. I need somebody telling me I did a good job. So AI has been doing that for me since I left Bentley.
Well, again, we're talking about real human needs, right? To feel heard, to feel seen,
Yeah.
to feel value, and people might say it's from the infancy, right? People want mostly, we know, validation from their dad, right? Affection from their mom and validation from their dad, right? So you grow up, you want someone to say, you want your boss, you want your coworker, you want someone to say, "Hey, I've done this well," pat on the back, like you said.
Yeah.
And AI is doing a good job at that, to be
Yeah.
honest, right?
Too
But
good a job.
so, so how else could we find better validation or feeling of self-worth, right? Because maybe it's not, we don't want to just be validated. We also want to be challenged. And we want to have someone that says, oh, you know what, Mark, 3 times in a row, he said, I love you, Chris, but that wasn't good enough. And when the 4th time he said, you did a good job, Chris, then that means more than someone who always says, well, you're good.
Set the difficulty in the AI. Set it like really high, Marine drill sergeant, like or like loving mother who just says yes to everything. Like, like
they just have to tune the model.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we just want to recap, what do we agree that AI can do or should do and cannot do? I'll let you guys answer as we're also, if you have any last questions for the audience, Q&A after this question. What can AI do and what AI cannot do?
Interesting. I mean, I think it can be a good supplement to a real therapist. And I also think it can be an excellent tool for people who don't need therapy, but need advice and support, and maybe even in a safe way. Now, ideally, somebody has people in their lives that they can sort of go to and feel like they can ask any question and not feel judged. But that's not always the case. And so I think it provides an excellent, is an excellent resource in those cases.
Mark? Thank you, Peter.
I'm going to copy, from earlier in the podcast, Peter, your answer of being, an entity, a human that can receive the information that you unload onto it, knowing that you have this trusting relationship with somebody, you've disclosed this knowledge, and this person is, legally binded, right, to keep this information confidential, is the fundamental difference that I've learned from you between an AI chatbot and a therapist. That you is that action of unloading the information is really key here. That's the key difference in my mind.
So I'm gonna kind of take both of your ideas, and I love the idea of seeking people in your life that have non-judgment, that you can listen to. But we said 28%, I believe, that don't have one friend that they can confide in, right? So that's a real problem, real reality, and let's not call it a problem. The beautiful thing is that all three of us and many other people know that there are skills that we can help people build, right?
100%.
And we have limited amount of time, yes, but we have time. You don't see patients anymore, Peter, but you're doing things to help many other patients and future therapists, which is great, right? And we, Mark and I, still see a few clients here and there, couples, individual, but mostly we're building this idea that we can help more with building communities, with having resets, which can have hundreds of people every week come in on Tuesday for free and listen for 25 minutes. How to have non-judgment themselves, how to help people in their family not to have judgment, how to be more vulnerable, and those are skills that people need, right? So, and AI can also help you do that. So potentially it can tell you the words. The thing that we learn, co-regulation is, well, when you're there with other humans and it's a human voice, not an AI voice, that tells you, hey, you don't need to have judgment. Hey, this is how we do compassion. Hey, you don't need to feel lonely. Then that allows something that the AI cannot do, right? And the AI can do a lot of good stuff in terms of psychoeducation and helping you, and even using CBT, ACT, psychodynamic, and giving you some tricks. But the human you will hear that voice that will motivate you to say, oh, here's another human that's vulnerable, and who's doing it? She's doing it. Yeah. I can do it too, right? It's that real motivation that I think AI cannot have, right?
Absolutely.
And Mark, how motivated were you in Florida earlier this week?
Oh, I was hyped up. I went to a Tony Robbins event in
wow.
Beach. Yeah, 6 days of just jumping, screaming, talking about limited beliefs. I mean, Tony himself, he works with therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists. I met a lot of them at the conference. A lot of people, a lot of providers who are really interested in his methods, and his methods do work. And he does point out that this is why I said this on the podcast as well, that a lot of of the therapeutic approach is very outdated, right? Just the talk therapy. And there's something to what Tony or other life coaches are doing, right? That that really works, right? He gets you to be in a peak physical state, and the physiology directly impacts your mindset.
The
It's very
neuroscience, yeah, of course.
exactly.
The neuropeptides we talked about,
Mhm.
oxytocin, that's what
Nervous systems, conditioning your nervous system, and you have
endorphins. You're more resilient. You can
yes,
do things that are uncomfortable because your mind and body
100%.
is ready. Yeah.
Yeah, and this stuff is going to stay with me. I drank the Tony Robbins Kool-Aid. I'm convinced. And it works for. It doesn't work for everyone, but it definitely works for a lot of people. And I think that a lot of the problem that we're addressing, is a direct impact of sitting in a stationary position for most of the day and not moving your body and feeling the consequences of that on your mood, on your thoughts, behavior, most of all, and what we can do to address that. Yeah.
Well, next podcast we have to do a standing up. We had a sales meeting earlier, and one of our sales rep in Michigan was doing her yoga during the sales meeting, and was like, "Don't stop! Like keep it active.
Keep it up.
You got to do that." And yeah, thank you both for your thoughts and your availability today. We talked about some difficult topics. I know AI is on the mind of everyone. AI is not there to replace us anytime soon. We have things that we can do. We have things that even dogs can do that AI cannot do, right? So hey, AI is still okay.
Still's got room.
Yeah, but we can use it. And thanks for doing a lot of the work to help therapists, to help companies like us, making sure that we're having ethical AI that solves real needs and that have those safety guards that are human. We have humans checking our AI, like you said. Your wife is looking at the trend, right? We have a scientific board. We have therapists, clinicians looking at what our AI is saying before we release it to the public and say, "Hey, good luck, guys." And then we have humans in the back that are tied to that, right? Yeah. So yes, we have free digital reset. Register on our website if you want to hear some of the thoughts that we talked about to build connection. Free every Tuesday, and then we have other programs. Mark and I are curating that, and evidence-based neuroscience. A lot of good comments on people that have been attending. 100% felt calmer, right? So we're doing the Calm Talk movement. Register for that. Peter, where could we reach you and learn more if we're institutions that want to know more about your AI for institutions and supervisors and therapists?
Yeah, so the product, we've called it Therapy Trainer. So we have a website, therapytrainer.ai. Please check it out. It's largely informational. If you want to get in touch with me and are interested in a demo, you can reach out to me through that site. You can also find me at drpeterforkner.com. I believe that's what it is, or on LinkedIn.
Thank you so much, Peter. And Mark, any last words?
Peter, thank you so much for talking and speaking with us today. It's always a pleasure talking to you. And I think we have really interesting, insightful, creative conversations. And I'm sure this is not the last time that we'll speak, and probably be more podcast sessions that we'll do again in the future.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
We want to know how those AI avatars are good and how they're helping the world. And hopefully we'll partner together, do some more podcasts. Have a great rest of the day. And anyone listening live, thank you. Anyone that's listening later, reach out to Mark and myself as well on LinkedIn or AWE Digital Wellness, or our website as well, awedigitalwellness.com. We're on all socials, and we're on you're in your living room, in your phone. But now it's time for you to go for a walk, have fun, hug someone, have real connections, and turn your media off right now. All right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.